Bene. Welcome everyone. Un caloroso benvenuto a tutti gli amici italiani che ci stanno seguendo, che si sono uniti a questo meeting e che ci seguono anche sulla diretta Facebook. Un caloroso benvenuto a tutti. Oggi argomento molto interessante che è tornato di moda, di grande interesse negli ultimi anni, ovvero Ambisonics. E lo faremo con un amico, un professionista di altissimo livello, Mr. Leonard Moskowitz. Welcome, Leonard.
Thank you, Fedele. I appreciate you asking me to speak today. I'm looking forward to this. And I wanted to thank Diego and Tommaso, who are our moderators, and for helping us on this. And I'll pass it to Tommaso.
Ok, thanks. Io ho già prodotto alcuni webinar sul tema Ambisonic. Per questi contenuti vi rimando al mio canale YouTube, là dove potete trovare i citati webinar o agli articoli pubblicati sul mio blog Il lato oscuro della fase, e questo per non tediarvi oltre, per lasciare tutto lo spazio disponibile all'amico Leonard. La diretta del webinar andrà in live sulla pagina Facebook dell'evento e sulla mia pagina personale. La registrazione del webinar sarà disponibile sul mio canale YouTube Fedele De Marco. In seno alle chat in Zoom, quindi nel meeting Zoom, e nelle chat della live su Facebook sono disponibili dei moderatori che raccoglieranno le domande che le presenteranno nel corso del webinar. Quindi a loro vi potete rivolgere per ogni esigenza e chiarimento. Bene, allora, dando spazio immediatamente al webinar e ai contenuti di questo, lascio spazio a Tommaso Olivieri e Diego Ternavasio, i moderatori del webinar, che vi illustreranno in inglese, per gli amici convenuti, le informazioni tecniche sul webinar. Ci vediamo dopo.
Hello to everyone, I am Tommaso and I'll be one of the two moderators of the webinar. Today we have the pleasure of being with Leonard Moskowitz, that is an engineer with degrees in electrical engineering and psychology with an MC degree from Polytechnic University of New York. He worked in the US aerospace industry for 20 years, designing some of the US Air Force's finest defense system and performed research and development in the fields of artificial intelligence and waveform analysis. Leonard is also a musician since he was 7 years old and enjoys recording and composing. His interest in music engineering and psychoacoustic all contributed to the development of course Sound's binaural microphones, founded in the 90s by Leonard. During the webinar, we will share you on the chat of the social network some links about the plays proposed by Leonard. We ask you to keep close your microphones during the webinar that also will be shared on the Facebook page. If you have some question about the topic covered, you can write in the public chat and Diego and I will propose them to Leonard. Thanks for the attention and good continuation.
Thank you. I appreciate the introduction. So this talk will take somewhere between 70 and 80 minutes, and it depends on the questions and how long the answers are. I'll share my screen and we'll get started. Core Sound was founded in 1990. I'll just give you a short introduction as to what Core Sound is and what we've done. Back in 2018, only about 2 years ago, we introduced Octamic. Octamic is the world's first ambisonic second-order microphone. And it's an A format microphone like our Tetramic, which was the world's first ambisonic A format microphone, which we introduced in 2006. We'll discuss what A format is later. And since 1989, 1990, we're the leading manufacturer of binaural microphones. Ambisonics was created around in the 1970s by Michael Gerson and Peter Craven at Oxford. And it's a framework for capturing, representing, and manipulating spatial acoustics. Typically, when we think of ambisonics, we think of an ambisonic microphone, a tetrahedral microphone, but that's only a small part of what ambisonics is. The other part of ambisonics, it makes the spatial recording process completely independent from the playback format. So you can edit and you can mix spatially, and then you can play back in any of an infinite number of formats. And it turns out that ambisonics is good for both spatial and non-spatial audio. So pretty much everything we can do with our current tools, we can do in ambisonics spatially and also non-spatially. If you think of how we've done recording, editing, mixing until now, we hide the spatials. So if I have a spot microphone on a speaker or on a violinist, once it's recorded, we have no idea of the spatials of the room that it was recorded in. And we just have that one track, which is the recording of that speaker or that violin. And you can't retrieve it, it's lost, it's gone. Ambisonics makes the spatials explicit, and it retains them so that you can use them. And at some point, you can decide to get rid of the spatials. And there are times when you've gotten rid of the spatials that you want to restore them, and you're able to do that. So ambisonics includes all of the spatials, and you can do everything in ambisonics that you could do in traditional recording, editing, and mixing. Another name for ambisonics might be B format. So B format is the key to ambisonics. Why? Because B format is how the spatial information is stored and represented. And we'll hear a little bit more about what B format is in a minute. So editing and mixing is done in B format. But the complexity of the B format is hidden. So you'll see the spatial information in B format is very, very detailed and complex. But when you're editing and mixing, all the complexity is hidden. You're working at a very top level. When it comes to ambisonics, you'll hear the word order, first order, second order, third order. Order refers to the spatial resolution. So second order ambisonics has more spatial precision and detail than first order. First order format, B format, has 4 channels, and second order has 9 channels. Third order has 16 channels, and it could go up to 7th order, which has 64 channels. B format captures everything going on acoustically at the point in space in the center of the 360 sphere. There are 2 ways to get into B format. One is to use an ambisonic microphone that creates B format recordings. And the other way is to insert mono audio into a B format editing mixing framework. So this is as complex as we're going to get in terms of spatials. So B format is also known as spherical harmonics. And here you see from 0 order up to 3rd order. 0 order is an omnidirectional. All it says is that there's sound present. In 1st order, you start to get some directional information. And what you have there are 3 figure 8 patterns, and they provide orthogonal directional information. So that first channel on the left in first order is called X, and it's a figure 8 microphone oriented in a certain direction. On the right side, you see the Y channel, and it's oriented 90 degrees from the first channel. And then you have a figure 8 that's pointed upwards and downwards. Now, there's limited directional precision you get from this first order representation. When you go to second order, you start to get more precision and detail. It gets more complex. So you see the 0 order and first order are pretty standard patterns. But once you get into second order, you start to get some complexity that you probably haven't seen before. And when you get to third order, it gets even more complex. The complexity buys you precision and resolution in space, in the spatials. So when you enter B format, you enter the spatial domain. And when you leave B format, you leave the spatial domain. And this will be a key slide because it'll tell us the flow of the talk today. What's Ambisonics used for? It's used for 3 things. It's used for live recording, both spatial and traditional. Most people, when they think of ambisonic microphones, they think of only spatial recording. But it turns out that an ambisonic microphone can be used for everything we do with a traditional mono mic. And we'll talk about that in some detail. So that's the first part of Ambisonics, is live recording. And the second thing Ambisonics is used for is spatial editing and mixing. And then the third thing that Ambisonics is used for is transforming or converting the B format, where we're doing all our editing and mixing, into a playback format. And in Ambisonics, that's totally independent of the recording, editing, and mixing. What that means, we'll discuss when we get to it. But it's essentially completely independent. And that's a key feature of Ambisonics. So we'll take that first application of Ambisonics of what is it used for? It's used for live recording. And we can break it up into 2 different parts. So we can record with an ambisonic microphone and capture a complete sound field with one ambisonic microphone. Take an ambisonic microphone, put it where the sound is good, and record. And what you've got is a complete record of the sound field at that point in space. Once you have that, you can do a few different things. You can play it back into a surround playback system and reconstruct the complete sound field. That's the traditional use of an ambisonic microphone. But there's another use, which is very, very, very flexible. It's creating virtual microphones. So if with an ambisonic recording, you've recorded everything going on at that point in space, in a computer, you can model any polar pattern you desire. So if you wanted to create a cardioid microphone pointed in that direction, you can do it. If you wanted to do 2 cardioids, you could do it. You wanted to do 5 cardioids, you could do it. If you wanted to do 20 cardioids, you could do it. It's all done in post-production. Let's say you didn't want a cardioid, you wanted a hypercardioid. You can choose a hypercardioid and a cardioid and an Omni and a figure 8 all at once in post-production. With a single ambisonic microphone, you can create essentially infinite numbers of coincident microphone arrays, all the way down to 1 microphone and all the way up to as many as your heart desires. And each of those microphones that you define can have any polar pattern you choose within the range of that particular order. And unusually, people don't think of doing spaced microphones arrays, but since you can create virtual microphones, if I wanted to do, let's say, an ORTF array with 2 cardioid microphones spaced by 17 centimeters, all I have to do is in post, decode the recordings from 2 ambisonic microphones into cardioids, and then rotate them to 110 degrees, and I've got myself an ORTF array, and we'll see a picture of this in a little while. By the way, feel free to ask questions. We'll do a Q&A at the end, but we'll also take questions during the talk. So if you have a question during the talk, don't hesitate. So we covered the use of microphones. Now, what about the second characteristic? It's spatial editing and mixing. You can use as sources, audio sources, live recordings from ambisonic microphones, or you can use live recordings using traditional mono microphones and insert them into the spatial context, into the spatial framework. Or the source could be audio created in the studio, but not with microphones. It could be synthesized, or it could be a track from years ago that's been stored somewhere. And the third use of ambisonics is decoding to essentially any playback system configuration. And you don't have to change the source tracks at all. Once you've got things encoded spatially, you can decode it to any playback system configuration. It could be mono, could be stereo, could be binaural, fixed head or head-tracked. It could be a 5.1 or a 7.1 or a 7.1.2 or a 714 or a 22.2, or it could be 3 stacked hexagons or octagon rings with overheads, or essentially any playback configuration you can think of. It's really that flexible. Once you've got your spatial mix, you can decode it to any playback configuration you please without having to remix or re-edit. So let's go back to that first use, recording sound fields. So this is recording the complete acoustic space, everything going on there acoustically. Some people look at an ambisonic microphone and they say, oh, that's 8 cardioids. What can I do with 8 cardioids? But in fact, it's not 8 cardioids. It's 1 ambisonic microphone that's capturing the entire sound field precisely. And then you can decode that sound field to speakers to reconstruct the entire sound field, or you can decode it to binaural playback for listening over headphones. And then if you're listening over headphones, you can also do head tracking, so that as I rotate or tilt my head, roll my head, the sound field follows. And what I'm hearing is pretty much almost exactly what I'd hear in the sound field itself, the original sound field. So at higher orders, the sweet spot for the reconstruction of that sound field is pretty large. So while at first order, it's very small, it's only about the size of your head, and you get outside that, you start to hear phasing effects. At second order, it's already about a 6-foot sphere. And within that sphere, there's no phasing effects at all. And you've recorded the entire sound field. Because you're using a single coincident array, and it's truly coincident, there's no phasing effects at all. It's monocompatible. No matter what you decode to, there will be no phasing effects due to the separate microphones that you create. And of course, it's a really, really simple setup, because all you do is place that mic where the sound is good and record. And then you've recorded the entire sound field. The second part of microphones for ambisonics is these virtual mics, virtual microphones. So one ambisonic microphone can be decoded to literally dozens of virtual microphones, each with a different polar pattern and pointing angle, and all of it's done in post-production. I'll show you an example later where we recorded a small choir, and we'll give you a link to recordings of that choir singing decoded to Blumlein, to binaural, and also to ORTF, I think. And the decoding is all done in post-production. As we said before, higher order ambisonic microphones can have more precise polar patterns than even mono mics, the best mono mics. So you've got a wonderful cardioid that you're used to using in your ORTF array, and you've been using it forever. I can show you that a higher order ambisonic microphone that's properly calibrated will be more precise than that mono mic. And virtual mics can have higher order polars. So all of us are used to hearing about figure-8 microphones and hypercardioid microphones and supercardioids and cardioids and subcardioids and omnis. All of those are first order microphones. With a higher order ambisonic microphone, you end up with polar patterns that you've never seen before. And they're tighter pickup patterns, and they can do things that the mono microphones can't do. So mono mics are limited to first order polars. Higher order microphones, ambisonic microphones, are not limited to the first order polars. And we'll see examples of that. So here's a higher order ambisonic microphone, one of our octa mics. On the left side, it's decoded to a first order cardioid. On the right side, you'll see the polar patterns for a well-known monocardioid. And it's an excellent cardioid. But if you look at the two of them, you'll see there are some differences. The well-known monocardioid, its rear null starts breaking down above about 4 kilohertz. And what happens below 250 hertz? Well, this polar doesn't tell you what happens. Let's look at the left side, and you'll see the octa mic decoded to a first order cardioid. And you'll see that the rear nulls are better than 35 dB above 500 hertz. On the right side, you see the nulls only go down, they're only showing you down to minus 30 dB. On the left side, we're showing you down to minus 40. And on the left side, that octa mic decoded to first order cardioid, the pattern still holds up to around 8 kilohertz. And you can see on the right side, it starts to break down above about 4 kilohertz. So perhaps if you look at these two polars, you'd say, gee, this octa mic decoded to first order cardioid, that's a higher order ambisonic microphone that's decoded to a first order cardioid, is at least as good and perhaps better than one of the best well-known monocardioids in the world. Let's look at an Omni. Well, this is pretty clear. On the right side, the well-known Omni starts breaking down above about 4 kilohertz. On the left side, you'll see octa mic decoded to Omni, and it's near perfect to above 10 kilohertz. So in this case, I think we can say that this higher order ambisonic virtual microphone, it's an Omni virtual microphone, is considerably better than the well-known mono Omni. How about a shotgun? So a well-known mono shotgun is on the right. You can see the front lobe starting to break down at around 4 kilohertz again. On the left side, you'll see the octa mic decoded to a first order virtual hypercardioid. And it's near perfect to around 10 kilohertz, both front and rear lobes. On the right side, if you look at the rear lobes, they change rather dramatically over the frequency band. But on the left side, you'll see that the higher order ambisonic microphone decoded to first order, a virtual hypercardioid, is near perfect to 10 kilohertz. Let's go one more. Here's a figure-8 microphone. On the right side, you have a well-known mono figure-8 mic. And it's pretty good, but you can see it's starting to break down above about 4 kilohertz. On the left side, you have octa mic decoded to a figure-8. This is a linear scale, so you can see the fine detail. And you'll see that the patterns overlay each other from 100 hertz up to 5 kilohertz here. And at 10 kilohertz, you see that the lobes have started to broaden. But otherwise, it's an essentially perfect figure 8 up to well above 5 kilohertz. And even at 10 kilohertz, it's a pretty good figure 8. So I said before that a higher order ambisonic microphone can create polar patterns that you can't get with mono mics. They just physically can't do them. With a single diaphragm or 2 diaphragms, you can't make a second order cardioid. So here you see octamic decoded to both a first order cardioid and a second order cardioid. The first order is on the left, and the second order is on the right. Again, this is linear scale, so you can see the fine detail. So a cardioid is down 6 dB at 90 degrees. That's a standard first order cardioid. A second order cardioid is down 12 dB, which means it's a much tighter pattern. Could you do this with a mono mic? No, you can't even buy it. It's not available. So with a higher order ambisonic microphone, you have these polar patterns, and there are many, many more. This is just one example of a second order polar pattern that's simply unavailable with mono mics. And these are all virtual microphones. Once the ambisonic microphone has captured the entire sound field with sufficient precision and resolution, you can synthesize or model any pattern you please in the computer in post. So all of these patterns that I showed you, you could have all of them simultaneously pointed in different directions, and as many of them as you please, all defined in post.
So Leonard, just to,
Please.
don't mean to cut you off, but we have a question. So Abe is asking, is the pattern effect by nearby reflection differently than a traditional cardioid? Well,
that's a good question. Because we're using, on the octamic, we're using cardioid elements. You don't want to get into the near field of the element because you'll have a proximity effect. So typically a meter away from the microphone, everything flattens out perfectly. There are other higher order ambisonic microphones that use Omni elements. So you'll see a photo later of 2 of them that use Omni elements, and they don't have a proximity effect. So you can get pretty much as close to them as you please, as long as you're not in the shadow or the near field of the sphere that they're mounted on. So you'd have to ask their manufacturer at what distance that breaks down. I hope I answered your question. So people don't think of ambisonic spaced arrays. They think of a single coincident microphone that's placed out there and captures a sound field. But if we're talking about virtual microphones, you can do spaced arrays with ambisonics, and because the polar patterns are so fine, you get a superior spaced array. On the left side, you see an ORTF array using 2 higher order ambisonic microphones. In this case, they're octamics. They're spaced 17 centimeters, just as a monomic ORTF array would be spaced. But here, you don't have to point the microphones. Why? Because you point them in post. And in post, I can point them so that there are 110 degrees between them. And that's probably one of the best ORTF arrays in the world, if not the best, because of the stable and precise polar patterns of those microphones. On the right side, you see an unusual spaced array. So this could be an ORTF surround array, or it could be an ORTF 3D array. What's the difference between them? The surround is azimuth only, horizontal plane only. And ORTF 3D includes the entire sphere, or at least the hemisphere above the horizontal plane. In general, they don't do a 3rd level below the horizontal plane. So each one of these microphones is interesting because it does double, triple, quadruple duty. If you looked at an ORTF 3D array that handled the top hemisphere, the horizontal plane, and the hemisphere above the horizontal plane, you would see they use 8 mono microphones. 4 of them are down in the horizontal plane, and 4 of them are to cover the the upper hemisphere. Now, an ORTF array is supposed to be 110 degrees and spaced at 17 centimeters. But with mono mics, you can't do that because the side array can't be at 110 if the front and rear arrays are at 110. So if the front array is at 110 and the rear array is at 110, that's a total of 220 of the 360 degrees that you've used already. That only leaves 140 degrees for the other two arrays. That's the left array and the right array. In an ambisonic array like this, each of these arrays can be 110 degree angles. Comes up to 440 degrees, but it doesn't matter because each mic does double, triple, quadruple duty, and it's defined in post. So the front array is 110 degrees, and then the left array in post is defined as 110 degrees too. The rear array is 110 degrees, and the right array is 110 degrees. So you've got 4 110 degree arrays if you want. Let's take that front left microphone. That front left microphone is working in the front array. It's working in the side array, the left side array. It's also acting as the upper layer of the ORTF 3D array. It's defined as, let's say, a cardioid facing up at 45 degrees and spaced 110 degrees again from its partner microphone in the left array. So unusually, this ambisonic array is actually 8 or 10 or 12, and it covers more angle than 360 degrees. Of course, there is no such thing as more angles than 360 degrees, but the way we use an array, it actually is 4 110 degree arrays. Of course, this simply can't be done with mono microphones. So let's summarize the virtual mic topic. One higher order ambisonic microphone can replace lots of mono mics. And the higher order ambisonic microphone has equal or better polar patterns in all of its decodes. The higher order ambisonic mic can do higher order polar patterns. And a higher order ambisonic mic can be used in both coincident and spaced arrays. And there's unrivaled flexibility in post. That's because it's capturing the entire sound field and then it's manipulating it in post, defining the polars and pointing them. So what's out there on the market in terms of first order ambisonic microphones? There's our Core Sound Tetra mic. There's a Sennheiser Ambio. Rode makes the NTSF1. There's a Zoom H3 VR recorder. There's Brahma coming out of India, which is essentially a handmade small number mic. And there's the old Soundfields. Soundfield is now out of business. Its assets were bought by Rode. But the old Soundfields is still available, the SPS 200, the 250, the 350, the Mark IV, and the Mark V. Here's a photo of them. On the right side, you have the Mark IV. That's the old Soundfield microphone. It was an excellent microphone for its time, but it's first order, and it's rather fragile. To the left of it is a Soundfield Mark V, which is a little more modern. It's also rather fragile. To the left of that is the Rode NTSF1, which only came out in the last year or two. It's an A format microphone, which means that the conversion or the encoding into B format is done in a computer. To the left of that is the Sennheiser Ambio microphone. It's also an A format first order microphone. To the left of that is the first A format microphone. It's called Tetra mic. And we actually had the first A format microphone back in about 2006. To the left of that isn't the first order microphone. It's a second order microphone. That's Octamic. You can see the differences in size. And that seems to matter to people who are doing 360 VR. The smaller the microphone, they preferred smaller than larger. So that's first order microphones. What about higher order microphones? Well, right now there are only 4. You'll see three of them pictured here. On the left is a Core Sound Octamic. It's a second order mic. Next to it is the Zilia ZM1. It's a third order microphone. And to the right of that is the MH Acoustics Eigenmic, and that's a fourth order. Both the Zilia and the MH Acoustics Eigenmic are hard spheres that use an Omni capsule. The Octamic uses Cardioid capsules, which offers certain advantages in terms of noise performance. They range in price from about $1,000 for the Zilia up to about $20,000 for the Eigenmic. The Core Sound Octamic is about $2,000. In my opinion, when it comes to microphones, second order is the sweet spot. Why? Because for binaural decoding, which is a lion's share of immersive audio, there's very little improvement beyond second order. And you can do a second order mic with only 8 channels. Even though the B format for second order is 9 channels, you can do a second order mic with only 8 channels. And 8-channel recorders are small, available, and inexpensive. They're less than $100 a recording channel. And there are many 8-channel mic pre's if you prefer recording into computers. And lots of DAWs have 8-channel buses. So in terms of a sweet spot for microphones, I think it's at second order. There's one more point to consider when you're talking microphones. It's whether you're calibrating the microphone individually, or what you're doing is you have a generic calibration for all of your microphones. So all of those microphones, those that you saw before, are not individually calibrated. What does calibration get you? Well, if you look at the specs for a Sennheiser Ambio or for a Rode NTSF1, and if you said, what's the -2 dB or -3 dB point in the bass frequencies at low frequency, you would see it's around 70 to 90 dB. We've actually measured them, not dB, excuse me, 70 to 90 hertz. And we've measured them and we've seen that that's true. But with calibration, that can be extended two more octaves. So Tetramic goes down to 27 hertz. Octamic goes down to about 27 to 30 hertz at -2 dB. And because ambisonic microphones depend on measuring the precise difference between the capsules in level, the acoustic differences between the capsules, without calibrating them, you can't have precision in your B format. You're limited to the manufacturing regularity of the capsule manufacturers. So each mic ideally should be individually calibrated, and a calibration file should be supplied with each of the microphones. If you're relying on a generic calibration, you've got a compromised system.
So Leonard, quick question from the chat. Adrian is asking if Nevaton VR will be considered one of these mics, meaning will be included in the category that you just mentioned.
Are you talking about the Nevaton, the one from Russia?
I believe so, yeah, Nevaton
Okay.
VR, yeah.
So Nevaton right now is, first of all, it's a first order microphone. It's not a higher order microphone. And we'll discuss the difference and whether a first order microphone is useful for much. So it turns out, I'll spill the beans here, that a first order microphone is really only good these days for ambiances where you don't need precision spatial location. So Nevaton is really good when it comes to noise performance. But as of yet, it still doesn't have a calibration that will allow an encoding. And it's being worked on. I know Angelo Farina in Italy is working on that. So it's available, but it's a first order microphone, which means it lacks spatial precision. And the individual calibration process it's not clear whether Nevaton will do individual calibration or not.
Right. There's also been mentioned Soundfield ST450 and Angimic E64, if you want to touch on those, if you know them.
So I mentioned the ST450s, 250s, 350s before. Those were manufactured, they're no longer being manufactured. What's the other one, please?
will be Engimic E64.
The Eigenmic. So we mentioned the Eigenmic. So we mentioned the Eigenmic. Their current one is the 32. The 64 hasn't been released yet. It's supposed to be released this year, but as of yet, it's not yet available. And it will be priced, they're aiming for about $10,000, which is great. And we'll talk about what are the limits of higher order microphones and what you lose by going up in order. We'll get to that. So let's leave the microphones and go into the second function of Ambisonics, which is spatial editing and mixing. So in your DAW, in your digital audio workstation, you'll be doing your editing and your mixing. And what tools do you use? You use a plugin suite. And there are plugin suites available in both VST, AAX, and AU formats from multiple manufacturers. Here you see 14 of them, I think, 13 of them.
Leonard, I'm sorry, we have a question from the Facebook page.
Please.
Federico Tumullo asks if does the Rode NTSF1 has the possibility to be calibrated?
Yes, we offer calibration. We're the only ones in the entire world who offer individual calibrations for those microphones. We're happy to do that for you.
Thank you.
So there are these 13 different plugin suites. There are probably a few more that I missed. Some of them are free and some of them you have to pay for. The IEM suite is from the University of, I think, Music and Arts in Graz. Sparta Compass is from the University of Aalto. Blue Ripple is from Richard First, who's a phenomenal, phenomenal mind. SSA is from Peter Stitt. Then you have Noisemakers. AmbiX is from Matthias Kronenachner. Facebook 360, I have to mention, is the spatial workstation, is also free. Sennheiser and Rode also provide some tools for their microphones. Again, all first order. Audio Ease is known for its head tracking. SSA has a wonderful head tracker plugin. VV Audio we work with, they do our encoder for Tetramic and Octamic, and they also have a few decoders. So all of these are available, ranging in price from being completely free, from the universities, most of them are completely free, to a few $100s, not expensive. And what functions do these plugins provide? You can see a list of pretty much everything they do. I'm sure there are a few that I missed, but this is most of them. So there's an encoder. What does an encoder do? It goes from a raw audio content, like a single capsule microphone, or the 8 capsules of an Octamic, and it converts them into B format. Remember, everything has to eventually get into B format so it can be manipulated in B format. That's where the spatial magic happens, B format. And then there's a decoder that goes from B format to the playback configuration. It could be a binaural decoder, or it could be a decoder to a speaker array. It could be a decoder to mono, a single speaker, or to a stereo pair, or to a hex ring, or to a 5.1, or to a 7.1. We'll see some of that. I hope if we have time, I'll show you what the plugins look like. And then there is a spatializer that takes a mono source and puts it in B format in space, locates it in 360 sphere space. A spatial editor can change the characteristics of the space that you're in. So you can add room reflections based on a room IR. Or the next one is a rotator for head tracking. Let's say I placed a microphone and I accidentally placed it 15 degrees off the front rear axis. In post, I can rotate it. You'll see that I did that a little later. We'll show you a case where that happened. And then you can also do head tracking. We'll discuss that a little bit more also. There are compressors and a beamformer. A beamformer allows you to create a virtual microphone from the B format. And that gives you a single track of that microphone that you've beamformed. There are panners and visualizers and delays and reverbs. Distance compensation is interesting because Ambisonic works at a single unit distance. So everything sounds in a raw B format recording like it's all the same distance from you. So if you want to place a sound source more distant or closer to you, you have to do some compensation. And then there's gain and metering, limiter, upmixers. Upmixers worth mentioning. So let's say you've made a first order recording and you want to use it in a third order framework in your editing and mixing. So how would you do that? Well, there are two ways to do it. One is just to use the first 4 channels, which is the first order channels, and use it in your third order, pad out the rest of the channels with silence. And that works. But if your sound source has the quality of not having too many sound sources in it, you can use an upmixer, an effective parametric upmixer. That's nonlinear, and I'll talk about it a little bit more later. And there's EQs, of course. Which DAWs support Ambisonics these days? Well, all of these. Some of them are only up to first order. So Waves is only up to first order Ambisonics. But Reaper and Pro Tools Ultimate and the others, many of the others, not all of them, go up to third order or higher. The last two there are Audio Mulch and Plogue Bidule, which are block and wire applications rather than DAWs. And they're very easy to use. So I'm going to show you more about things you can do with Plogue Bidule simply because it's so simple to use. I use it a lot here. So Plogue Bidule is a blocks and wires application. It was originally designed and built for live performance with MIDI devices and things like that. But since it uses plugins, VST and a few others, it's exceedingly simple to string together the I/O and the plugins. And so it's really useful for Ambisonics as long as you don't have to do much editing. If you need to edit, you have to go back to your DAW. But for simple things, you can use Plogue Bidule and things happen real fast. Let's talk about what encode and decode are before we go on. So when we talk about encoding, it means going from raw audio into B format. So let's take that Octamic. It has 8 cardioid capsules. That's A format. If I want to convert that into B format, remember that spherical harmonics photo that I showed you, that image, where you have at first format, you have 3 figure 8s. And then in the second order, you have lots more lobes that are narrower angles to give you more precision and resolution. Encoding means going from those raw A format signals, the cardioid capsules, into B format, into spatials. For Octamic, it would be a second order B format. And decoding means going from B format to playback channels. Playback being on speakers or on headphones. Here's encoding. Let's see if I can share another screen. Okay. Nope, that's not it. Give me one more moment, or otherwise I'll just talk to this. There we go. So this is a live Plogue Bidule screen. And here you see the encoding process. There's a file player. All it does is take the 8 channels of Octamic A format, and it sends it into an encoder, which in this case is VV Octo encode, but it could be any other encoder for any other microphone. And what comes out is 9 channels of B format, second order B format, which goes to a recorder. So let's click on this and you'll see here's the file player. And you can see it allows you to point to a file. and then to play it. And then it comes out of this player and it goes to the encoder. Let's look at the encoder. Here's the encoder. In this case, it's VV octo encode. It allows you to choose the calibration files for this particular microphone. It lets you decide whether the microphone is in its normal upright position or it's inverted, whether you're using a low latency version of the encoder so that you can do streaming with very low latency, and then the output format, which is the older FUMA, which is pretty much not used anymore, or the current Ambix format, which is used. There's another little section here on HOA optimization, which we're working on. It's not quite finished, but it's working very well so far. We plan to release it within the next few months. So you see there's 8 channels of input and 9 channels of output. And what if I started playing, you would start to see these indicators flash. How about the recorder is again simply a recording plugin, or it's accessing the operating system device writing, and it allows you to choose a file to write to. So we just saw this. How about decoding a Headtracked binaural? So this again is live Plogue Bidule. Again, we have the file player. Now we have a rotate plugin. This is SSA's A3 rotate. And it allows you to rotate. Oh, I should mention that this audio file player has 9 channels, so it's B format. If I wanted to, I could do the encoding here too. I could take 8 channels of A format, encode it, and then feed this. Instead, I've got a B format file that I'm playing. And I have a rotator. It allows me to rotate it in yaw, pitch, and roll. Also allows me to hook up a head tracker. I don't think you can see it. I'm holding it up, but here's a head tracker, and it goes on top of your headphones. And as you rotate your head, tilt it, roll, or yaw your head, it rotates the audio sound field. And then comes the binaural decoder. So here's the IEM binaural decoder, and it's allowing me to do headphone equalization if I want. So if I have a Sennheiser HD 650 microphone, I can allow for that, and I can compensate for its frequency response irregularities. Or I can add another plugin, like SonarWorks Reference 4 to do that. And I can also impose an HRTF on this. Although normally I would do that during final decode. And then since I want to listen to it while I'm decoding the binaural, I have a volume control here, a gain control, and then output to the speakers. And over here, I have, again, a recording plugin. Okay. How about head tracking? So you saw that that binaural decoder had a head tracker. So this is the EDTracker Pro Headtracker app. And what it does is it lets you scale your pitch roll and calibrate the head tracker so that it's, when you think it's facing straight ahead, it really is facing straight ahead. And then it simply works. And it's about $100. So the complete head tracking setup for the plugin and the head tracker itself is about $150 to $200. Okay, what if you need to decode to speakers? So this is IEM's AIIRAD decoder, which is one of the better decoders that's available. In this case, it's set up for 12 speakers, 8 of them in the horizontal plane, 3 of them above, and 1 of them below. You could just as easily, by plugging in the azimuth and elevation positions of the speakers that you'll be using, you can define any array that you please. So if you wanted to do a hex ring, you can do a simple hex ring. If you wanted to do an octagonal ring, an octagon ring, you could do that. If you wanted to do a 5.1 or a 7.1 or a 7.1.4 or a 22.2, just put their azimuth and elevation positions in the table, compute, calculate a decoder, and you're ready to go. You go from B format to the speaker array. And that's a decode. Before I mentioned that you can use a first order recording and do a nonlinear decode to move it up to second order or third order or even higher orders. And there are 3 nonlinear parametric decoders available these days. There's Compass from the Alto group. Those are the same people who do Sparta. There's Harpex, and there's an older Dirac, which pretty much nobody uses these days. The differences between them is that the more recent ones can convert to higher orders more accurately. They can pull more sources out of the sound field. So let's say Dirac. Dirac could only handle one sound source, one directional sound source, and one diffuse component, and it was completely diffuse. Harpex could handle 2 source components, 2 sound sources. If we look at Compass, though, Compass can handle multiple direct sound sources and spatial ambient component. It doesn't have to be diffuse. The spatial component can also have some spatial information. Okay, so this is an interesting context. So this is music before 1800 in New York City. And Rob Anderson is their recording engineer. And he gave us permission to use an octamic. He wanted to see what it sounded like. So we were recording Stile Antico, which is an early music choir from the UK, in a wonderful church in Manhattan, upper West Side Manhattan. I'm sorry, maybe on the East Side. And Rob used his ORTF array using well-known mono microphones. And mounted at the same location between the mono microphones, we had an octamic. Tommaso, would you please distribute those links?
Yes, we have just sent all the link on.
Thank you.
Also.
Thank you. So the 3 links we've sent you are recordings of the mono ORTF array. And then you have 2 more. The two of them are the octamic decoded to binaural and the octamic decoded to Blumlein. Blumlein are 2 crossed figure 8s. And as you saw before, the figure 8 polar patterns of the octamic are superlative. And it makes essentially the best Blumlein microphone array that you could have. So if you listen to those 3 files, listen to the Blumlein and the ORTF over speakers, and listen to the binaural over headphones, and you'll get a sense of what a decode from a higher order ambisonic microphone can do. And you'll see that spatially it's very, very precise. It has a slightly different sound quality to the mono mics. And if you ask me, it's my opinion, my position is that the octamic decodes are clearer, they have a finer tonality, but in the end, it's a matter of taste. And some people prefer the tonality of the mono mics. Now that octamic could have been decoded to other things besides Blumlein and binaural. In fact, we did decode it to 3 hypercardioids, a left, a center, and a right. And it came out very interesting. The spatials were very nice. The tonality could have been better. I happen to prefer the Blumlein. If I'm playing back over speakers, I prefer the Blumlein. And of course, for headphones, I'd prefer the binaural. So here you see an octamic in Abbey Road Studio. So this was used behind the conductor's head to record the London Symphony Orchestra. and it was being used for the latest Star Wars video game. On the right side, there's a ring of string musicians, and there's a higher order ambisonic microphone in the middle. I don't know if it's an octamic, it might have been an eigenmic, but it's recording everything going on around it, and it was intended to do the string section of Eleanor Rigby. This was also done at Abbey Road. And the playback is on Dolby Atmos, their premier soundstage. It's a certified Dolby Atmos soundstage. The response we got from the engineers at Abbey Road was that it was amazing. But here's just one more application quickly. I'm showing an octamic, but it could be any higher order ambisonic microphone. In this case, one of the rock supergroups came to New Jersey, an arena in Newark, and the recording was used for ambience in the arena. But let's say you're on the internet and you want to play back a higher order ambisonic microphone recording, a higher order ambisonic recording. So a B format recording. Where can you do that? Well, YouTube allows for first order ambisonic B format. Facebook will allow up to second order. And last week or the week before that, Host came out. It's a product of IEM in Graz again, and just came out. It's an open source higher order ambisonic streamer. The source for it is available on GitHub, and I've played with it a bit. It's up to fourth order, and it's really, really amazing. So if you have a website and you want to incorporate up to fourth order ambisonic streaming, Host is probably where you want to go. If you can live with second order, Facebook will do it. And if first order, YouTube will do it. I'm very excited about Host. Seems to be a really powerful streaming player. Okay, from everything I've said so far, it would seem like the higher the order, the better. Well, it's not quite right. For binaural playback, and I'll show you a graph in a minute, it turns out that first order really doesn't do the job right in terms of sound source location and tonality. First order doesn't do the job. Second order is significantly better than first order and is about 98% of the way there. Third order is marginally better than second order, and fourth order and higher is no better than third order. So third order and second order are essentially interchangeable. There's very little increase in performance from second order to third order. For immersive speaker array playback, if you're listening in a room with speakers, you really have to do third order minimum. And you can improve it up to about seventh order, which is 64 channels. It improves slightly and steadily. You could hear the difference up to about 64 channels. First order, I want to reiterate, is never enough except for low resolution ambiances. I'm sorry. Sorry, I have to set this up again. Okay, here we are. So if you're doing binaural playback, here's a graph from Franz Zotter that he presented at Virtual Vienna, the AES conference last week. And what he showed was that if you were going from a 704 orchestra recording to binaural, the spatial quality at first order isn't enough. At second order, it's very close to as good as you can get. And at third and higher order, that's as good as you can get. And for timbral quality, it's essentially the same. First order, the timbral quality is okay, fair, but not what you'd like to do if you can. And second and higher are essentially perfect. So why don't you go as high as you can all the time in order? Well, for microphones, as you go up in order, you end up with processing noise at lower frequencies. So for Octamic, we limit the second order components to 500 hertz. That's at the low end. It goes up to 20 kilohertz at the high end, but at the low end, it's down to about 500 hertz, because below that, you end up with too much processing noise. But it turns out that's a good match for how we hear spatials. At 500, you don't get too much in the way of spatial information. For higher order microphones, say a third order or a fourth order, that low frequency cutoff due to noise is even higher. So that a fourth order is up probably around 1500 hertz, and the question of whether there's too much noise there is questionable, but it's 1500 hertz or higher. The higher order your microphone, then the larger the number of channels. You have to use more recording channels. And that, of course, increases the cost of your recorder. For DAWs, at higher orders, there are larger bus channel counts. And for speaker arrays, you need more speakers to take advantage of the resolution. So that's the downside of higher orders. Before I mentioned that I've thought that the microphone's sweet spot is second order. Octamic is a 2H1V, which means it's full second order in azimuth and full second order in elevation up to plus and minus 60 degrees. But above plus and minus 60 degrees, it's first order. That allows us to use 8 capsules, which matches low-cost recorders like the Zoom F8 and the Sound Devices MixPre 10.2. And we get low-frequency extension to 500 hertz for second-order channels. And using only 8 channels for recording limits the cost. We're at the end here. So to summarize, Ambisonics is a very, very powerful framework for immersive audio. It also can be used for traditional editing and mixing, because you can always decode down to stereo or mono or 5.1. But you're doing it all in the spatial domain, so you haven't lost the spatial information the way you do with traditional editing and mixing. Higher order microphones can be exceedingly precise and flexible. They can replace mono mics. They can be better than mono mics, even in non-spatial recordings. That Ambisonics breaks out the decode phase of going from your editing format to the playback format, makes one spatial mix usable in an infinite number of playback formats, whether it's different arrangements of speakers or binaural or head-tracked binaural. And as you saw, Ambisonics is very well supported. There's a large number of DAWs and more coming online all the time. And thank you very much. I appreciate you being here and listening, and I'm open to questions.
So quick questions about microphone from Marcus. So what's your opinion on Voyage audio mic, the spatial mic, if you know it and if it's calibrated?
Well, the spatial audio mic from Voyage Audio is a second order microphone. It is hooked up to a recorder via a USB, so it's intended to record to a computer rather than to an audio recorder. I don't know whether it's individually calibrated, and if it is, whether it's individually calibrated to the extent that Octamic is individually calibrated. So I can't say, I don't know enough about it.
Another question from Thomas. Can you tell us a bit more about the HOA optimization option on VV Encode?
Thank you for asking. No, I can't tell you anything about it yet. It's a new feature that's coming shortly. It's very interesting, and I promise that the Ambisonic world will find it very interesting, but I can't tell you anything more at this point.
Tommaso, do we have any question from Facebook?
No, from Facebook is all okay. We have yet a question before, and now is all okay.
The question is, how can you make the Octamic more portable for outdoor use? So the Octamic is rather small. You can see it here. It uses 2 cables to 8 XLRs and a tiny little box, which is about 4 inches on a side, which does the conversion from unbalanced to balanced. And the recorder that you would use would be a Sound Devices Mix Pre 10.2 or a Zoom F8N, which is also rather small. So the entire recording setup will easily fit into a common bag. As far as windscreens, we recommend the Right Code Cyclone for the best wind noise reduction. You can also use the Right Code Baby Ball gag. And that works very well too, but the Cyclone is better. So it's actually quite small.
Leonard, there is a question about Sabine, then ask the best way to use the Ambisonic for traditional stereo.
For traditional stereo. So you're mixing and editing in B format, and then you decode to a stereo format. What could that stereo format be? Well, it could be Blumlein, which gives you 2 channels with lots and lots of spatial detail. Or it could be 2 cardioids in XY, or it could be 3 hypercardioids mixed to 2 channels, or it could be essentially any number of virtual microphones mixed in the traditional way, in non-spatial way, down to stereo.
Okay, all clear, I think. Thanks, Leonard.
My pleasure.
For your time, for your experience, for your presentation.
I think we have a last question.
Okay, if you have time. If
you have still a few minutes, could you tell us a bit more about rendering and mixing Ambisonics for film 5.1 and 7.1?
Okay, what I'll do is I'll mention what AIIRAD is doing for that. So what they're doing is they're taking, first of all, they're using Atmos. And so the higher order Ambisonic component is just a piece of what they do. And then with the Ambisonic component, once they're in B format, they decode. And they decode to the target speaker system, 5.1 or 7.1 or 7.1.4, or whatever you can think of, including the full Atmos range. And what we recommend for asymmetrical arrays, speaker arrays, like 5.1, 7.1, 7.1.4, is to use the Blue Ripple decoders. Blue Ripple does an especially good job on asymmetrical speaker configurations. So that's what we'd recommend, the Blue Ripple decoders.
All right, another question just came.
Good.
So what is the best way to do a pre-mix for multiple speaker? I will mix in a 24 speaker DOM later. Wonder if I should pre-mix a binaural or make a cheap ad hoc speaker array.
I'm not quite sure what you're asking. You're asking about a premix before you decode to the final playback format? Is that it?
Should I premix in a binaural or make a cheap ad hoc speaker array?
Okay, so you have a choice. It's whatever works for you. If you're able to use headphones that are EQ'd properly, either using SonarWorks or one of the other HRF, SonarWorks for frequency response and an HRTF correction for your particular ears, then binaural works just fine. If you want to use a ring of speakers, the minimum is about a hexagon ring. And if you need the height component, you can add 2 overheads to it. So it's really a matter of taste, of what you prefer. It's certainly easy to do it on headphones, and you do get a very representative premix. What you hear on binaural is what you're going to hear out in the field on speaker array.
Right. Another couple of questions. They're
Great.
asking. So Marco, are space microphone surround techniques mixable with ambisonic microphones?
Repeat that, please.
Are space microphone surround technique mixable with ambisonic microphones?
Oh, yes. Once you're into the B format, so you can take an ORTF 3D array, whether it's made with mono microphones or ambisonic microphones, doesn't matter. You can place those microphones from the array into B format space. And once you've put it into B format space, you can decode it to anything you want in terms of the playback system.
Another couple of questions from Abe. Can you tell us more about spatial data editing? Can I reduce specific reflections?
Oh, yes. So some of the plugins are very, very tight beamformers. There's one virtual mic beamformer that's called a probe. And what it is the maximum directivity for that order. And you can point it in any direction you please. So if you're pointing it at a source, anything to the off axis is going to be reduced tremendously. So yes, those plugins are available. Even such a simple beamformer as a hypercardioid. If you do a second order or a third order hypercardioid, you're going to get a very, very tight pattern. And that's going to exclude things that are off axis.
All right, no more question on Zoom at the moment. Tommaso, do you have any question from the other page? No, really?
No, Facebook is all okay. We don't have any question.
We're right on time. We're at 80 minutes. Great.
Great. So thanks, Leonard, again. Thanks to the moderator, Diego and Tommaso, for the great support. Thanks to all for participation. Ciao. Ciao a tutti. Grazie.
Grazie a Fedele.
Great.
Bye, Leonard. Thank you for all. Ciao, Fedele.
Ciao.